Welcome back. Donald Trump dominating the polls. Democrats seeming to dump all their eggs in Hillary's basket, and the demise of the Bush dynasty. 2015 had its share of big stories. Joining me now to recap the year in politics, noted presidential historian and author of Last Act, The Final Years and Emerging Legacy of Ronald Reagan, Craig Shirley. Craig, great to see you. Thanks for being with me.
You bet, Dennis.
So, the rise of Donald Trump. Is he the next Ronald Reagan, or does he even go beyond that sort of tag, if you will?
You know, when John Connally was running for president in 1980, the saying going around town around Washington was that, yes, Connally might look like a president, but is the job big enough for him? I guess the question of the presidency is it big enough for Donald Trump? I don't think he is the next Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was sui generis. He was unique. We'll never see his likes again. I do think that Trump does conduct himself in a fashion that is anti-status quo, and he talks about the future. And those two things are hallmarks of Reaganism.
Well, I mean, let's take a look at Jeb Bush. I mean, at the beginning of the year, beginning of 2015, it was Jeb Bush, the new logo, and he was raising all this crazy money, and it was, oh my goodness, we're going to have Jeb versus Hillary. And now Jeb Bush is basically, he hardly has a heartbeat. What happened there?
He's become the incredible shrinking candidate, hasn't he? I think, Dennis, is that we are witnessing in real time the demise of the House of Bush. It was always artificially inflated to some degree by Ronald Reagan, because in '88, a New York Times poll showed that a majority of voters who voted for Bush saw it as a continuation of the Reagan Revolution and a third term in many ways for Ronald Reagan. And of course, George W. Won in 2000, but it was kind of fluky, obviously, as we all know, because of the Florida recount and the intervention of the U.S. Supreme Court. He won only very narrowly in 2004, but Jeb has just proved not to be as resilient as his brother and his father, and so it's a referendum basically on Bushism, and so far it's 97% against a resurrection of Bushism.
Well, all right, so let's take what we've learned in 2015. I mean, like, the refugee crisis is a nightmare, and it's still going on. And I mean, if you look at the border down our own southern border, we've got people coming in. By the time you and I are done with this conversation, we've taken in a few 100 new Americans, so if you want to call them that. So if you take those things that happened in 2015, they're definitely going to come into 2016. So you've got the four real names is Carson, Cruz, Rubio, and Donald, as my pen cap flies across the room. Tell me right now, how are those issues from 2015 coming into 2016, how is that going to shape the entire GOP race? How is that going to shape the Republican Party? Do we even have a chance at beating Hillary?
Oh, I think there's definitely a chance of beating Hillary. In fact, I think there's a very good chance, Dennis. I think that the Democrats probably are going to rue the day they nominate Hillary Clinton, because let's face it, she's not a good candidate. You know, yes, she can win in the liberal New York, but she lost a majority of primaries to Barack Obama in 2008, obviously, and she's just not very appealing beyond a narrow, small portion of the activist liberal base of the Democratic Party. I just don't see her having broad appeal. So if the Republicans don't shoot themselves in the foot, all things being equal, and don't forget too, is that Barack Obama is historically low numbers for this time of an American presidency. In many ways, it'll be seen as a referendum on Obama, and so that is going to be weighing on her as well. So if the Republicans don't shoot themselves in the foot, all things being equal, is that they should retake the White House in 2016.
All right, well, let's say, for instance, let's do the worst case scenario, and Hillary Clinton is the president of the United States. When we do this segment again, you and I, next year, and I say to you, what did the GOP do wrong in 2016 that now we have to say President Hillary? What are you going to tell me? I mean, in other words, what does the GOP have to avoid? And you've got less than a minute to tell me.
They have to avoid taking the advice of the consulting classes, because they'll say pander to this interest group, pander to the women, moderate on abortion, moderate on federal spending, soften up. They will advise the Republican consulting class will give all the wrong advice, as they typically do. And if the Republican nominee takes that bad advice, then they will lose. If they run a conservative populist reform campaign about cleaning up Washington, about a strong national defense and promoting individual rights and personal freedom, then they'll win.
All right, well, I'm going to tell you right now, I've got less than 10 seconds. I'm going to hold you. Give me one name right now in less than 5 seconds. Who's getting the nomination? Make the prediction now. What is it?
Ted Cruz.
Oh, Ted Cruz, not Donald Trump. From Craig Shirley, you heard it here. All right, we will be back in a minute. You do not want to miss the next segment. We go deeper into Jeb Bush. We talk about how the GOP field is shrinking. We do a whole bunch of different stuff you don't want to miss.